What's up YouTube? It's James Q Quick from Learn, Build, Teach. And today I want to tell you guys my 5 takeaways from the State of JavaScript survey 2018. Alright guys, so if you are not aware, the State of JavaScript survey is a survey that's come out for the last couple of years that, as the title implies, asks people about the state of JavaScript. So on the front page here, it says that they've collected data from over 20,000 developers asking questions on topics ranging from front-end frameworks to testing libraries to back-end to tooling to all these different things. And I think this is, if you're a JavaScript developer, if you're a front-end developer, if you're a back-end developer that uses JavaScript, if you're someone that's interested in looking at JavaScript, there's some insightful information that I think you guys can get out of this survey. So I want to start with number 1 on this list of 5 takeaways from the state of JavaScript is that the fact that JavaScript has had to evolve. Now, I think people who start with JavaScript or started in past tense with JavaScript in the last couple of years may not have realized how many awesome features were available in other languages that JavaScript was missing for many years. Now, I want to give you some specific examples here, and to do that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the results. So I'm going to open up the results, and I'm going to first look at flavors of JavaScript once we get in here with this fancy website. JavaScript flavors. Notice that ES6 and TypeScript here are the two biggest flavors, I'm using air quotes here that you can't see, of JavaScript. I think flavors is kind of an interesting term. ES6 is really just a version of JavaScript. TypeScript is a typed superset of JavaScript. So a couple of takeaways here. ES6 is obviously very popular if you watch any tutorials on JavaScript. If you watch my tutorials, I really try to stress taking advantage of ES6 features. And some of the most amazing ones are classes, fat arrow functions, are just a couple, and then there's lots of other things on top of that as well. So it's interesting, if you didn't come from a different language first, you may not realize that like the idea of classes and object-oriented programming is obviously very big in other languages. Things like Java and C# are really built on top of object-oriented programming, and classes is really the heart and soul and the base of what that is. So classes have been really well defined and were really the main central part of Java and C#, for example, from the beginning. Now, another thing here is arrow functions, and arrow functions are very similar to something called link functions that I will bring up here. Link function C#, don't know why I'm in all caps. And the link syntax is something I saw several years ago that was really new to me, but it's basically the exact same as an arrow function here. So I didn't understand this for the longest time. I saw code using link syntax, and it never made sense until I got to JavaScript and I learned ES6 arrow functions. So you can see, if you're familiar with arrow functions, this is basically a function that takes in a parameter and then has an implicit return for whatever this piece of code is. So this is exactly how arrow functions work in JavaScript. And again, this syntax has been available in C# for several years and came out in JavaScript maybe a few years after it was available in C#. So another thing that's really interesting, this is actually from a later version of JavaScript where you get async await in JavaScript. Let me pull that up for you guys. And this is something that, again, has been available in C# for a long time. It's the ability to do asynchronous calls, but then kind of wait for them to return back. So you guys can look if you're interested on async await here and kind of get some more details. Now, another thing that I thought was really interesting, TypeScript is, again, a typed superset of JavaScript, and it really gives you structure on defining what sort of parameters go into functions, what types of objects functions return, and things like that. So this is something that, again, Java and C# have been taking advantage of forever. And I think it's really interesting that a tool like this, with people being in love with the flexibility of JavaScript, are now really excited to take advantage of TypeScript, which really gives a lot of structure on top of that. So I've got a quote here, or just kind of my thought is, developers love the flexibility of JavaScript, but sometimes want a little more structure. And I think that's where TypeScript fits in. Now, this all comes back to the idea here, the takeaway for me, that JavaScript has had to evolve, and it will continue to need to evolve. And we see that every day. There's always a new framework. There's always a new library. There's always a new flavor of JavaScript, which is one of the really cool things about JavaScript. So I think it's moving in the right direction. It's getting better. It's making more and more people happy. It's making more and more people comfortable, and it's only going to continue to get better from there. So number 2 on my list is the tooling is better, and it makes a big difference. So tooling can come in a lot of different forms. So we look at TypeScript. There is tooling around TypeScript that allows you to write TypeScript and then compile or transpile that into regular JavaScript that the browser can understand. The browser cannot understand TypeScript, but it does understand JavaScript. So the tooling behind JavaScript actually does that translation process into JavaScript. The same thing for Flow and Reason and Elm and ClojureScript. These are things that are kind of built on top of JavaScript that give tooling to basically transpile down to regular JavaScript. So without that tooling, we would not be able to really take advantage in a practical way of all these cool features that these different flavors, again, using air quotes here, flavors of JavaScript use. So another thing that I think is super, super cool is command line interfaces. And these are just packages of tooling, basically, that you get with different frameworks, for example, to do different commands for different things. So if we look at the front-end frameworks here, this is probably no surprise. React, Vue, and Angular are by far the most popular. A couple of initial thoughts here. Angular is still really popular, but I think people are a little less excited about it. It's a little more like big company enterprisey. React is really the most popular right now. It's really caught on. The open source community, up and coming developers are really going React. Big companies are now moving React as well. And then Vue is still in this position where it's gaining a lot of awareness and traction, but it's still not quite to the point that people are actually using it. So if you look at this middle section, people have heard of it and would like to learn, and that's 46% of people, but they haven't actually really worked with it. And the people that have worked with it is a little bit lower, right? Although the people who used it and would use it again is higher than Angular. So I think you can kind of infer some trends there on these frameworks. But with each of these things, and Angular was the first, they come with these this set of tooling to help ease the process of creating applications, building them, and so on and so on. So something like the Angular CLI gives you tons of commands that you can run to generate new projects, to create or run a live reloading server, to build your code, to optimize your code, to run test. It's got all these things that are just built in, and you're starting to see this catch on more and more. So there's Vue CLI. Vue CLI 3 just came out recently. Similar type tooling there. It actually has a GUI built with it, which is pretty cool. And Angular has since come out with a GUI for their Angular CLI tools as well. And then with React, there's Create React app that is created by Facebook. Has similar type things as well, to scaffold an application, to configure it to do different things. It has a build system built in and all that kind of stuff. So without these tools, developing for these platforms would be incredibly more difficult than it is. And there's these kinds of tools for everything. Think about when you install a package with JavaScript, you install it via npm and you install it via a command line script. So you do an npm install and then a package name. Without that ability, without those command line tools, referencing and including other packages of JavaScript is a lot more difficult. So all this tooling surrounding JavaScript is incredible. Every day it gets better. Every day there's something new. And building websites would be considerably much more complicated without all of these tools. So the third takeaway on this list is that JavaScript is more than just the web. So if we look at, let's start with mobile and desktop. There's Electron here is to build native cross-platform desktop applications. And the best example of this is Visual Studio Code, which I rant and rave about and have a course on if you guys are interested in learning about Visual Studio Code. But Visual Studio Code is built with Electron. It's cross-platform on Mac, Linux, and Windows. It's blazing fast. It's super, super powerful. And it has, in only a handful of years, become the de facto editor for web development. It's really incredible. If you try it out and you haven't, you won't regret it. You'll love it. If you're already using it, you probably already know what I'm talking about. So a couple of additional ones that are using Electron, the desktop app for Slack. A lot of people here are probably using Slack. That is actually built using Electron as well. The Skype app, the Figma app, the Hyper Terminal by Zeet is built with Electron as well. So there are some major applications that are built using Electron that allow you to get desktop native applications, which is pretty sweet with JavaScript. So not only is there desktop applications, you can also do mobile applications. Cordova is probably the oldest option here, which basically allows you to wrap your website, your web code into a web view component of Android or iOS or something like that. But it doesn't give you native performance and it doesn't give you native features. It gives you some, but not all. So React Native is actually giving you a much more native approach where you're not going to sacrifice on performance, and you still get to use basically the React framework that you're comfortable with, although it is a little bit different because you're using not the React DOM, but you're using the React APIs for either Android or iOS. So React Native, I hear more and more about. It's getting super popular, which is not a big surprise considering that React is getting more popular. React Native is just kind of growing alongside of that as well. So from here, if we look at other libraries, I think there's progressive web apps, and these are becoming more and more of a conversation. I'm not very well versed in progressive web apps, but they're basically kind of a hybrid website / mobile app, which gives you the ability to save basically a progressive web app, a website offline so that you can work with it on your phone as kind of a mobile application. You get an offline experience and it'll kind of sync up its data when it has network to be able to do that. So I think keep your eyes and ears open for progressive web apps. You'll hear more and more about those as the time goes on. And the last piece on here is just the server side. So the backend framework. So Node.js is very well used by lots of big companies. Some ones that are pretty interesting to me: Netflix, PayPal, Uber, LinkedIn. I think Walmart is on that list as well. These are really big companies that are using Node, so it's legit. It can be used in big production applications to do whatever you want. Now, Express is by far the leading backend framework. I mean, it's not even close if you look at the statistics on here. 64% people using it versus 8.6 for Next.js, which is server-side rendering that I'm not too well versed in again as well. But they've got a couple of other ones, Koa and Sails and Feather.js. There's also Meteor, which I thought was super cool. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with it, but it's a full stack framework and it has a lot of scaffolding stuff in it. I'm personally a big fan of scaffolding tools, things that generate a lot of code for you. That's really boilerplate. I really like that. Some people don't like to be tied into how the boilerplate code does what it does. I really like it. So I thought Meteor was super cool. But again, it's nowhere near as popular as Express. So these are all frameworks that sit on top of Node that allow you to do server-side code with JavaScript. So next up is number 4 on our list, and it's speaking of backend code and server-side code. One of my kind of unique takeaways here is that servers are slightly less needed than they used to be. So if we look at backend frameworks and we look at other libraries, notice that it's not super big, but something called serverless is on here. And serverless functions does not mean there's not a server. It just means that you, the developer, don't have to worry about maintaining server hardware or software. So serverless functions, AWS Lambda functions from Amazon's cloud is probably the most popular version of this. And it gives you the ability to really write one-off functions that you just write the code that you need. You don't have to write any boilerplate server code. You don't have to write anything else. You just write the code that you need. And AWS, Amazon takes care of routing stuff to that function and passing in the things that you expect to come into, basically like a REST endpoint. And then you can do with that data what you want. So these are becoming more and more useful, again, because it's less stuff the developer has to take care of. Also, with the growth of static site generators, and I've talked about static sites in a recent video that you guys can look at as well. With the growth of static site generators, they really focus on decoupling the front end from the back end. They don't have a server side, they don't have a server kind of tied to it that you create. So a lot of people use serverless functions to add back end functionality to their static sites or just sites in general that they have that may not necessarily be static sites. So another thing here that is incredibly popular, and I love it personally because of how amazing it is Firebase. This is kind of a complete backend for your mobile and web apps that really takes no code to set up. So you get things like authentication, database. You can actually have serverless functions in Firebase as well. So really you can build and you could have everything that you need in terms of a backend be taken care of by Firebase. Never have to write code to maintain a server, never have to write full boilerplate server code, never have to maintain server software or hardware. You don't have to do any of that. Google takes care of it for you. It's all done, and then you've got everything you need to move ahead with your application. So because of these couple of different things, servers in general are a little less needed. So let's move on to the fifth and last item here on the list of takeaways from the State of JavaScript survey is testing. Testing is becoming more and more important. So there's this quote on here that they've got. Let me see if I can find it, if it's on the testing section. Yeah. Testing, is this thing on? Sorry, but I would never want to make a mockery of this section. That would be Jasmine, just mean. That would be just mean. Get it? And that's bad karma. So this is a cool, super cheesy quote here that just kind of hits on the biggest testing frameworks in JavaScript. Jest, Mocha, Jasmine, there's Karma, there's Enzyme, there's several others, and these are becoming more popular. More people are using them. More people are taking JavaScript seriously. They're writing tests, and they're really kind of embracing the need to write these tests. If you think about creating an NPM package, for example, that can potentially be used by millions of people, millions of times each day. So people are really testing their code, as they should be, to make sure that it works when they push out new changes and things like that. So one big takeaway that I've got outside of the survey is on the advanced React course by Wes Boss, which he spent like 6 months, maybe more, working on this course. I don't know if I can scroll down to it, but he advertises, 5 hours of testing is what he advertises. I think I referenced 6 in an article that I wrote. So 5 hours of testing, that's how much time he spends writing tests for his applications. So he's obviously spending a significant amount of time in this course working with testing to make sure that you guys have the best testing skills, that you understand how to do it, when to do it, and how it's going to affect your application as you go forward. So I think that's a great example of people taking testing more seriously. And you can see here that, again, these testing frameworks are getting more and more popular. People are happy with them, and they're including that in their typical workflow. So those are the top 5 takeaways. I've got just a couple of notes here as a recap. One, there's 3 major front-end frameworks that you really care about: Angular, React, and Vue. React is the highest growing and highest paying front-end framework. So if you're looking to learn a new one, React seems to be the way to go. Express on the server side is by far the most dominant node framework there is. TypeScript is becoming more and more popular, and this is just my personal opinion. I think it's going to take over. I think it's going to continue to grow, and I think it's going to continue to become the de facto way to write JavaScript, the way that it is the de facto way to write Angular applications. Angular is set up automatically with Angular CLI to use TypeScript. Tooling in JavaScript is making JavaScript more evolved and a more appealing language. Things that were missing from JavaScript that people would gripe about in the past, now those things are getting there, and they're getting good, and they're getting better and better and better each day. So I think more people are going to be interested in using JavaScript because of that. There's options with JavaScript to reach almost any platform: desktop, mobile, server, web, hybrid, anything you want to do, any platform, you can probably get there using JavaScript. One thing to keep an eye on as well, GraphQL, which I didn't mention in here, is on the rise, and I think this kind of ties in well with Gatsby.js is on the rise, which kind of has built-in support for GraphQL. So those are a couple of technologies to keep your eyes out for. So that's the State of JavaScript Survey 2018, just some of my takeaways, and I hit on some of the different numbers and graphs here that I think would be most relevant to you guys. So I'm curious, have you guys gone through the survey? Did you participate in the survey? Was there anything that stood out to you that you thought was really interesting? Any takeaways, any things that you think that I might be missing in my review here? Let me know what you guys think. Comment below. I would love to hear from you. And thanks for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and you can check out my newsletter on learnbuildteach.com to get updates on the latest content as it comes out. Thanks for watching.